It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Hi, it's Feedback Friday, and if you think my voice sounds strange, it's because it is. I'm very tired. It's been another difficult week, but it's Feedback Friday, and the focus is on you guys. There's gonna be two main buckets to this video. The response to the Twitter stuff, and the response to Wellness Wednesday. I'll start with Wellness Wednesday because it'll probably be quicker. And then I'm going to get to the Twitter stuff because I think that takes more time. And I think that maybe Wellness Wednesday is a good jumping off point to the Twitter stuff. So if you like this sort of content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. Okay, so Wellness Wednesday, not great traffic, but in terms of doing good, resounding success. So I'll keep it. That's why I do the Patreon model, because traffic doesn't matter as much as people signing up to the Patreon. So as long as people keep people signing up to the Patreon, I don't care if a particular segment doesn't get the same amount of traffic. Eventually, if Wellness Wednesday kind of takes on a demographics of its own, perhaps I will branch it off into its own YouTube channel that exclusively does that. Managing multiple YouTube channels is a pain in the ass, though. So we'll see. Maybe it will take over more content on this channel because it's just so much more soul feeding to do. It gave me a big boost to see you guys doing the exercises. Your what you are proud of, what you listed really made me smile. I read through them. I actually read through them multiple times, and I can't pick my favorites. The people that said they'd heard similar things explained, but in different ways. This one clicked for them. Awesome. The person that told me not to stare at the cat puke. Awesome. You guys really, for the most part, totally understood the purpose of this exercise, and your enthusiasm really was really inspiring. And I implore everybody to go and read the comments just to get a smile yourself, because it's just like it's a list of comments of everyday victories, and that's the whole point. I did make notes about some of the people that were less positive on it, some of the topics you want covered. Abuse and loss of control, feeling like they have no control, especially during the pandemic, was a big one. I'll probably do a pandemic specific one next week, just because it's timely. Healthy versus unhealthy anger also seemed to be a theme. So these are things I've made notes on. You saw me taking notes while I was talking there. These are things I've made notes on, and I am using this to shape future videos. The thing about Wellness Wednesday is that every single one of them will have an exercise. So sometimes it takes longer to figure out a simple, effective exercise for people to do, but I do think it's important to give people tools instead of just like pontificating on a subject. Right. In this, I know for me, people telling me, well, you have to be less angry. Well, you have to regain control. Well, you have to do this kind of shit. That shit didn't help me because they're not telling me how. Right. I'm going to try to fill in the how. And if the particular shape of the tactic doesn't work, by all means, adapt it to something that works for you. This is a jumping off point. But, it's really nice when people come together in joy. And that's what the response to that video felt like. And this is why I'm starting with it. Because moving over to the Twitter stuff, I have a bunch of comments I want to read, but I want to take the bulk of the time on there seemed to be this collective but Antifa, but Black Lives Matter, but double standard. And it seemed to me a lot bigger than just Twitter. It seemed to be that if it was just Twitter, people wouldn't have been so upset. It was that it was Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and once again we got into this, it's coordinated, it's collusion, and Jack Dorsey did not help in his bad. It started off good, his Twitter response, but it got very bad. And the one you noticed me wincing, because the thing that made me wince was, I do not believe it was coordinated. He said, and my thought was, Jack, this is not time to mince words. You're the head of Twitter. You know, or you should know, whether it was coordinated or not. That's leaving yourself an escape hatch. Was it coordinated or wasn't? If it wasn't coordinated, say so emphatically. There's reason to believe that everybody sort of made the same decision at the same time for the same reason. This is plausible. I do not believe it was coordinated. It's not strong enough. And when I saw that, I'm like, oh, shit. So I'm going to try to provide some information. But first, I want you guys to feel heard. So I've done a selection of comments, and I'm going to use that as a jumping off point to sort of present some stuff. I get that a lot of people are really not happy with me right now on this. I watched, there's a life cycle to a video, and I always find that when something upsets a particular constituency on the internet, traffic is like, approval is high when it's like the regulars, the people who watch everything I do. And I'm like, all right, fine. Whatever happens next, I know the regulars were okay with it. And then the sometimes viewers get it. The people who only watch when it's some sort of controversial issue and it starts to slide. And then the Reddit effect happens. It's like it hit a subreddit because there's a bunch of dislikes, but not a similar angry typing thing. So people just like use multiple accounts to hit the dislike button or brigade it or something like that. That's not organic. That's not. And then it starts going back up again as people who just sort of, have busy lives and come late to it see it again. And that's exactly what happened with that Twitter video. And then I stopped, and it's like, I saw some of the comments, and again, a single well-worded argument is more important than a whole bunch of dislikes. And I saw some people who are regular contributors to the comment section upset about this. And so, okay, it needs some attention. So I'm not going to read the names of the commenters because I don't want anybody to take crap, because it's a smorgasbord of responses that I've put. Smorgasbord is a great word. But the first is just explaining something to me, which I appreciate. It made sense of something. I'll say the name on this one because it's positive. Brian DeWolf says, yes, it's effectively a ban, but a permanent suspension is an accurate description. The account will remain in their database, but will always be in a suspended state. Doing that ensures nobody else will be able to use that username, and also shows anyone who visits the page that it has been suspended. As for the incitement sentence, I read it as, he incited violence already and could possibly do it again. And since it happened once, we can't leave the account active any longer because the what ifs have changed to did happen. And therefore we might be seen as complicit in any future incitement, since we can no longer claim that we had no idea violence could happen as a result of his activities on Twitter. Now, if anybody at Twitter is watching this, I suggest you hire Brian DeWolf or somebody like him, because he was just clearer than Twitter's official message. So Twitter needs somebody like Brian to write for them, because that was a far clearer explanation than what Twitter gave. It was less mealy-mouthed. Yay, Brian. See, this is why I love comments like this. So then somebody said something that I have to correct, because I was like, oh, if one person is thinking this, other people probably think this. And okay, fair. Let's be clear real quick. Twitter, Facebook, and Google are not private companies. They are publicly traded companies. I can log in right now and buy a share of each of these corporations, and so could you. If you disagree with they are treating a constitutional matter, then do you have the ability to stop them? Okay, you notice the grammar on this is a bit off, but private company does not mean it's not publicly traded. Private sector, corporations, public sector, government. That's what that means. A privately traded company is responsible only to its shareholders. And yes, controlling interest shareholders do have a say in that company. But the government doesn't. And the general public doesn't. If they feel like there's enough of a loss of business, they will respond to the public. But the government cannot force a private company to, outside of regulation, it can't tell them what to do with their business. Because the minute that happens, they're no longer private sector. So I found a big thing about this is people get hung up on terms. Public sector, government. Private sector, businesses. Really important distinction. It doesn't matter if it's a publicly traded company or like a sole proprietorship or a partnership. The private sector does, outside of regulations, like environmental regulations and things like that, the government doesn't get to tell them what to do. That's a very important protection if you care about free speech. Because if there is no separation between private corporations and the government, then every company ultimately becomes an extension of the government, a propaganda machine for the government, like what happens in Russia and China. It's very important. I know people are upset with these tech companies right now. Monopolies or companies getting too big is a serious concern. But the solution to that is not a government takeover of these companies. Yes, Zelda, that's worse. Yes, honey, hi. Zelda agrees. Okay, so this one, I'm like, I'm going to read it because I'm going to be like, there. Leanna, as someone who deeply cares about your content, I think it's time you stop being naive about the political leanings of your audience. I don't know what that means. Moving on. Interesting point of view there. Hadn't thought that they are right, but explained it wrong. You're quite right that if they had said simply his current content risks continuing escalating violence, they are a private business, just like a TV network, radio station, streaming platform. They have a right to say what is and is not appropriate for their platform. I'm sure it's all in the terms of service no one actually reads. I sat down and periodically read the Twitter terms of service because I try to figure out the lines. This is not the comment. This is me. They're not clear enough. I will say that. Sure, we can have an argument about the de facto monopoly that exists on the lines of communication and discourse. There are multiple platforms, but not all with the same user base and reach. So unless there's a global public access social media with no ads and is publicly funded, we have to deal with it being privately owned. This is censorship, but not a legal issue. It's an ethical one. It's the balance between being an open platform as broadly accessible as possible, but also ethically not allowing false, misleading, and bad faith content that actively causes harm. I just wish Twitter and all social media would treat its users equally when it comes to their enforcement. I thought that was a well-worded comment, and I thought it balanced, equality often does not mean letting the biggest bullies run free. That's the problem social media companies have. What does it mean to be a free speech platform? Jack Dorsey was talking about this blue sky thing and his rambling stuff about Bitcoin, and he believes there was no collusion. But in order to create a free speech platform, you first have to define what free speech means. And I did a whole series on free speech back in the day where I talked about, two competing visions of free speech. One is just let the loudest person win. And the other is basically some sort of structure that makes sure that it's not just about who yells the loudest, that people from different backgrounds people get a turn, right? And it seems like when we talk about free speech platforms on the internet, it's one-sided, heavily leaning to that let the loudest voice win. And the loudest ideas are not the best ideas. And that, I mean, that's a driver of inequality, including in speech. Because that's a winner-take-all system. That's not going to get us where we want to go. It may seem like a good idea on paper, but, you know, so does communism and so does objectivism. Just leaving that there. So thanks for the comment. Someone said, today Leanna learned that Twitter treats people differently based on Twitter's whim. Now, you know how every conservative feels. Well, maybe not yet, but you're getting there. I have been talking about the problems with Twitter's unequal enforcement of rules since about 2000, definitely 2016, possibly 2015. So if you're a new user, maybe you missed that, but I've been talking about this stuff for a while. The fact that Twitter waited until just now to ban him is really suspicious. I'm thinking this was motivated by other circumstances than he did really bad shit now, okay? Especially with the fact this isn't the first time he's incited violence. Commenter, yeah. I mean, I think we can all kind of say duh on that. This isn't the Trump did something especially bad. It's utilitarian philosophy. It's if something... It is consequentialism. It's if there's a good outcome, then something is moral. If there's a bad outcome, then something is immoral. And that's just not how ethics work. Like the fact that everybody was just like, I don't know, until something really bad happened. The reason I believe, going back to the previous comment, why it's not collusion, why it wasn't a coordinated effort, is because every social media company based on the same action all went, oh shit, we were kind of complicit in this, and they all just panicked at the exact same time. That's how media companies work in a lot of ways. And I do agree. Trump's done way worse. Trump's done way worse on Twitter. And that's why I'm just like, this is not a low point for Twitter, but more on that in a bit. Another commenter, I tend to take the Stephen Fry position on free speech. I may not agree with what you have to say, but I would die to defend your right to make an arse of yourself in front of as many people as possible. And I agree with that principle, commenter. The issue I have is that right now the mob is deciding who is making an arse of themselves. And people's words are getting manipulated and twisted. It's happened to me. It's very strange that there were a bunch of comments that were kind of rubbing their hands with glee, hoping I've gotten canceled, hoping I'd get banned. Anti-Gamergate types got my Facebook account shut down during that period because I was using my stage name instead of my full legal name. They got my account shut down. So it's happened. I don't know why you assume it hasn't happened. You assume that only a person who's never had it happen would, feel this. No. And like the thing is, at the point my account got shut down, got suspended, I had to change the name on it. At the point the account got suspended, they were supposed to not be doing that anymore. People were supposed to be able to use recognized stage names to protect drag and transgender cabaret performers, protect their safety. So these so-called protectors of left-wing so-and-so, got my account reported on a technicality. Like they were reporting me based on something that keeps trans people safe, trans performers safe, drag performers safe. It was complete hypocrisy. So don't tell me I don't know what it's like. Like it's insane that you would think I've been canceled twice Like, I don't know why you think I haven't experienced this, which is precisely why I'm like, this is not Twitter's low point by far. I've seen Twitter's low point. I've seen people get banned for far, far, far less. Facebook allowed an impersonator to impersonate me with like, nah, too bad, for months. For months. Spreading malicious lies about mostly my sexuality, which is weird. But they were using a cosplay photo of me and they wouldn't shut it down. And it was in violation of their terms, but for whatever reason, Facebook went, Meh. So I've been on both sides of this. Now, this is a point where this is going to get really nuanced. And I need you to hear me out and I need you to not get triggered. Okay. There, like I said, there was a theme of comments that but Antifa, but BLM, they never got banned. I hear you. I understand the concern. I understand where the belief that there is this political ideology double standard, where it comes from. I want to present some information, not as a counterpoint. I'm not trying to prove anybody wrong here. I'm not trying to say, no, this is a dumb idea. I just want to give you some food for thought. So if you want to rethink that very hard and fast opinion, then, okay. Because there have been purges of left-wing accounts on Twitter. It's just, it seems that every 6 months or a lifetime lately. And I'll show you evidence of it. You don't have to take my word for it. Okay, here we go. And I will put links in the description box so you can see this. Okay, here we go. This is from Thursday, the 18th of October, 2018. So not that long ago. And this is in Wired, not some crank website. Okay, Twitter has purged left-wing accounts with no explanation. Dozens of activists linked to the Occupy movement are up in arms after their accounts were suspended by Twitter. It is almost a complete... Twitter accounts run by activists linked to the Occupy movement have been suspended after the social network continued its attempted crackdown on bots and fake accounts. Around 80 activists with a collective following of 5 million people are thought to have had their accounts suspended. And organizers and activists say their Twitter accounts were suspended without an explanation from the social network. Many of the accounts were created in 2011 and 2012 at the height of the Occupy movements. The mass suspension of accounts linked to the Occupy movement comes as Twitter steps up efforts to clean up its platform. The company has reportedly suspended 1,500 accounts over the past week that were suspected of being run by members of pro-Trump 4chan members masquerading as liberal activists, according to anonymous sources speaking to the New York Times. So this is an example of actual activists getting banned. You could say, but, no. Twitter is so paranoid that they just go on these mass reactive banning sprees. They're not, they would have to think more clearly to have an ideological drive here. Now, I also know, and there's no articles done on this, but I also know personally some left-wing people who, and I stayed out of Comicsgate, okay, but they were left-wing anti-Comicsgate people who got their accounts shut down. They're extremely liberal. They're extremely progressive. They got their accounts shut down. So it's not just right-wing accounts. You're giving Twitter way too much credit for pre-planning. This is reactive. It's stupid. It's overreactions. Yes, it isn't political in the way you think. It's a cover your ass move. Now, I'm choosing my words very carefully here. The stuff about a whole bunch of statues got torn down, a whole bunch of vandalism happened, a whole bunch of rioting and looting happened. And nobody did anything. I see why that opinion has formed. I lay that opinion on the feet of too many media platforms who were more afraid of Twitter, of the backlash they were going to get, than doing fair and accurate reporting about what was going on. They had a message they wanted to push, and this was on the left and the right. And so it fell to like Medium posts and things like that of people to actually go down there and do shoe leather reporting, to actually find out what the heck happened when, the looting started over the summer. And I've looked into this a lot. I've talked to some people. I've done a lot of research. Broad strokes, the people who were peacefully protesting during the day and the people who were wrecking shit at night were broad strokes not the same people. And a lot of majority black neighborhoods got wrecked. Majority minority neighborhoods got wrecked during those riots. There's some interesting reporting on that. And this is where it's like, all right, maybe there's something to the Antifa angle on this. But again, it wasn't Black Lives Matter. So when people start going BLM, 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 be careful there. Because there is the opposite of evidence that it was actually Black Lives Matter protesters who turned into rioters at night. Now, there's a difference between a looter, which is essentially a crime of opportunity, and a rioter, which is people who show up with like bear spray and like weapons, planning in advance to wreck shit. And so this Medium post, again, I will link to it, by Michael Tracy. Very well researched. He provides photographic evidence and all that stuff. I'm going to do a couple of highlights. The first is actually later in the article, but just again, food for thought. Okay. Maybe the media commenters who reflexively glamorize these riots don't know or don't care, but the primary victims, meaning those who feared for their safety, suffered severe material losses, and whose lives were upended, are themselves minorities and were targeted by activist whites. A deli operated by a Somali man in Minneapolis remained fully boarded up with bullet holes still visible in the partially shattered windows, caused by shots fired from an armed private security force that was summoned to protect businesses during the peak of the riots. Residents recall with astonishment that Minneapolis police were essentially nowhere to be found as destruction folders. So did you catch that? That private security forces actually caused some of the damage. According to this man, who like many others did not want to be formally interviewed, the majority of those who wreaked havoc on his establishment were white. Note that scrawled onto the plywood boarding up the Somali man's shop is the classic anarchist A symbol, popular among white left-wing activists. And you'll see here, there's the thing. You'll see some of these businesses. I'll link it to you. I'm not going to bore you here. But please don't hurt us. We support BLM. That there's pictures of a lot of black-owned businesses looted. They're notable by barbershops. Apparently, a lot of Hmong businesses in the Minneapolis area got hit too, which is a callback to the LA riots. But the reporting that was on the ground pretty consistently said that these were not BLM people. These were either these were predominantly anarchists, white bad actors who showed up to basically as an opportunistic infection with what was going on, basically knowing that black people would get blamed. So what do if you're a reporter in that? Well, ideally, you report on all of it, but you don't do that if you're worried about your ratings, right? And that's the big problem with monetized TV news. Instead of news being a condition of license for a channel, cable news is now all about making money. which means running stories that will keep your viewers happy instead of challenging them, which is a big problem. Okay. So here's another excerpt from the same article. Again, link below. Of the dozens and dozens of randomly selected Black Americans that I've so far spoken to across the United States, only 2 express what one might call a positive view of the riots, and they were both young men. Everyone else I have encountered is unabashedly scornful of rioting, and many even express apprehensions about the basic logic of a movement referred to as Black Lives Matter, which incongruously appears to them to have caused increasing suffering in their predominantly Black neighborhoods. Here's an interview I conducted on video with a Black man, Tony in Milwaukee, who describes what it was like to escape from a riotous mob on his way home from work. It's crazy, man. I really don't understand it because they're saying Black Lives Matter and all this stuff, but man, you're hurting the Black community. And he had, multiple interviews that went that way. The problem we have, and I've said this before, is you have, and it's the same on the right. You've got a relatively small contingent of people making everybody else look bad. But there is this, call them what you want. Antifa, anarchists, whatever. You've got this small group of people who basically live to fuck shit up, and they wreck every movement they attach themselves to because they don't care about the cause. They want to wreck shit. And the idea that all this rioting and all this looting happened over the summer and there was no consequence for it is just factually inaccurate, because support for Black Lives Matter, after initially being at a peak as the crazy pants stuff happened over the summer, the support declined to the point that instead of making gains in Congress because of the unpopularity of Donald Trump, Democrats actually lost seats because conservatives effectively painted them as, well, Republicans effectively painted them as, in lockstep with Black Lives Matter and defund the police. So you can't say that there were no consequences. People didn't like it. It was unpopular. So when you judge but these people aren't, first of all, many Black Lives Matter protesters did get arrested. I don't know why that wasn't reported on more widely. The reason I know this is they've actually been on cable news now that their cases are resolved, talking about it. They ended up not being convicted of anything. It was overzealous prosecution. And these are people who are totally peaceful. They're not radicals. Or they're on the mainstream end of radical, we'll say, right? Al Sharpton's been talking a lot lately about, in order to do those protests, they needed permits and they needed site maps and they needed to jump through all these hoops, tons of insurance. Perhaps that's why there hasn't been more made of it, because Black Lives Matter's insurance paid for some of this damage. Maybe, I don't know. But he talked about all the hoops they had to jump through. And you hear him, you see the aggrievement on the other side being like, I don't see these protesters turn rioters having to do any of that. So the aggrievement's on both sides. The distrust goes both ways. And this isn't going to get better with but Antifa, but Black Lives Matter. And Antifa's a scourge, okay? Antifa is anti-progress, and they have been, if you read any history about the actual effectiveness of Antifa in the 1930s, Antifa did then what Antifa's doing now. It gives would-be dictators, governments with authoritarian streaks, a big bad wolf to scare people with. That's what they did in the 30s in Europe. That's what they're doing now. It's not effective. It's not right. Their tactics, Cobra Kai, you don't end a fight by fighting. You end a fight by taking away the fight. So I hear you about those concerns, but I would suggest that at the end of the day, that's two wrongs make a right thinking. And other people who've watched this channel can contest, can confirm. I have been consistent on this. I have been saying Antifa doesn't help for years. All these people, you never called it out, because they go through my Twitter feed as if that's the only place I have an opinion. I have podcasts, I have here, I have Twitch. I deliberately do not archive. I was having that problem with YouTube exports for a while. I deliberately do not archive my Twitch streams because I do not want stuff taken out of context, come back through false light frankenbiting to bite me in the ass. I learned my lesson there. People don't believe you once the lie is out, right? But I have been consistent about my dislike for Antifa. I had she's now passed, but a woman named Lex Gore on the Hey Ladies podcast that we had to put on pause because of COVID, because there are a ton of moms who are contributors. Lex passed away, but we did an entire podcast where she went on at length as a left-wing opponent of Antifa. She was an enforcer with the Kensington Market punks. She was the real deal. And we talked at length about what's wrong with Antifa. So go away with accusing me of a double standard. That being said, two wrongs don't make a right. Shit getting out of hand in the summer and shit getting out of hand now, saying, but shit got out of hand in the summer, you're not part of the solution with that thinking. That's conspiratorial. That's passing the buck. That's, I don't want to come on too strong here. I don't want to come on too hard here. Everybody has to make a choice for themselves. Do you want to blame someone? Or do you want things to get better? I want things to get better. Which means we can't change the past. What's done is done. All we can do is make tomorrow better. And fighting over stuff we can't change doesn't do that. I'll repeat. Fighting over stuff we can't change doesn't do that. All the angry typing and all the outrage in the world doesn't move the needle, except in the way you don't want it to go. Look at the trend lines for Black Lives Matter if you don't believe me. Okay? I actually said on Twitch that, Black Lives Matter had shit the bed. And Trump screwed it up. And that's very cynical. And I don't like thinking that way. But it's two wrongs make a right. People, including Black people, did not like the rioting and violence over the summer. And I lived in a neighborhood that was relatively high crime. Trust me, nobody gives a shit about who's doing it. Okay? They just want it to stop. They just want to live in a safer neighborhood. But the fact that, minority-owned businesses were smashed up along with everybody else needs to be heard, right? Needs to be known, needs to be reported. The fact that numerous corroborating witnesses say that the people doing it were predominantly white. Now, conversely, and people aren't going to want to hear this, but there is no evidence, no real evidence. Photos put on social media while it's going on. First rule of just-in-time reporting. Original reports are often wrong. This sounds bizarre, But this has been a rule. It's been a rule in every major event. In the chaos of the moment, stuff gets misreported. And one of the stories that went out very early on was that Antifa were within the ranks of the whole thing wrecking stuff. Now, I'm not going to say that some Antifa would not take the opportunity to punch cops, because I know better. But in this case, there's evidence that some of the groups that had pre-planned the riot planned to dress like Antifa so that that story could move forward. And some of the people allegedly who were Antifa turned out to be part of far-right groups. Now, some of you watching this are not going to believe me. And I get that. I get that this is not something that facts are going to solve. But I'm just putting that out there for the people who care. To those people who facts aren't going to solve this, because you're just afraid, right? You feel like there's a target painted on you because of the color of your skin and because of your gender. And I get that. And I get that that fear is real. And I get that there are logical reasons for you to feel that way. And I wish I could do this stuff earlier than the 41-minute mark, right? But this is the reality of this format with the feedback of the week thing. I'm going to repeat that. Your fears come from a logical place, based on the information you've been fed, based on the context you've been given. I get why you're scared. Like, I also get why people in parts of America who were most affected by the opioid crisis feel like nobody gives a damn and like they were left behind. I get why people who have dreams and the only thing that is standing between them and their dreams is money. I get why you're frustrated, and I get why you see all this stuff and you're like, what about me? Why don't I matter? I get that. I get that. I just implore you, much like don't make the mistake in overreach that Black Lives Matter did over the summer, okay? People can relate to, I'm scared, I feel left behind, and these are my reasons. When you go into the but Antifa, you lose people. Trust me. Because again, I repeat, it's not because there's a left-wing bias. And I know you're not going to believe me, but maybe some of you will just think about it, okay? It's not that there's a left-wing bias. It's the average person does not give a shit who started it, or who was a minority of it, or what group did what to who and what. They just want it to stop. They just want to not open their computers or check their phones and have something be on fire. They don't care who's doing it. So continuing to fight this, they did it finger pointing thing, people don't care. People don't care. And that's the truth. Now, I will offer that it is not in Antifa's playbook to help the far right. They would show up to brawl with the far right. And if they can take some cheap shots at cops, well, so be it. It's not in their playbook, just for the record. Anarchists would go down there to fuck shit up. Okay, so I think a lot of anarchist activity is being, and I know it's Antifa, but that sounds like a body wash to me. I think a lot of anarchist activity is being written off to Antifa just because the right-wing media got a hold of the whole Antifa narrative. But it is a narrative, just like anything else. The truth is much more nuanced. And being on a side and fighting the other side, it may make you feel momentarily safer. Trust me, I feel extremely exposed the last few weeks. The number of people who have decided to take pot shots at me, like going on Twitch right now, is just terrifying because I'm just exposed. Anybody can come up and start any shit they want with me. And, you know, a few dozen viewers, my Twitch channel's not that big, but still a few dozen viewers are held hostage to somebody trying to start shit. And I have to make it as entertaining as I possibly can. And that's scary because it can go so wrong. I have to make sure I don't lose my cool. And I did lose my cool this week because people talked about animals. Person. Shouldn't say people. I'm not going to make the AOC mistake. But I'm getting worn down by the fact that it is 6 hours a week of just being completely exposed and anybody can show up and take any shot at me that they want. So I get feeling raw and I get feeling tired and I get feeling scared. But please don't make enemies where you don't need to. You know, please recognize that the people you're shouting at probably just want this to go away. And there's absolutely no point fighting with these online activists because the ones who are the real deal, they've studied the Twitter rules. They know where the lines are. They know how to just stay on the edge of Twitter's rules. And that's why they don't get banned. Not because there's a left-wing bias, because they know how to ride the rules. And they know how to ride how Twitter enforces their rules. And it's bullshit. It's not fair because they have access to resources that the rest of us don't. And the truth is, if Twitter was more transparent, everybody would have access to the information that those, you know, left-wing operatives have. And like I've talked to people not on Twitter, but on YouTube. On the YouTube side, and I've talked to them about, yeah, it's a wording here, like say this instead of that. And just to be clear, the people that told me this weren't liberal. Those are conservatives, okay? Just in case anybody cares. They're like, don't say this, say that. But they also told me that you're a woman on YouTube, you're going to come under fire more. Like, that's just a reality. I appreciate them being frank with me, but they know. They can't do anything about policy. They're just trying to help out the people that they can. And I appreciate that because I understand how it works now. Any system where ultimately a human being has to make a final call is going to be flawed. But you know what? They can be a lot less flawed than this. And so I maintain, after all this, I've heard you, but I maintain, and I understand, but I maintain that the best way to create a better internet for everyone is not to scream about bias and not to free speech. It's to have a consistent message insisting on clear, transparent rules that are equally enforced across the board. That's the message. That's what's really going to help. Because otherwise it's just going to be this swing of power polarity, right? So hopefully this was a bit of a parlay and people can calm down some. Because again, I do understand the emotional underpinning of what you're saying. Okay? Okay. Cool. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/LeannaK. That was long. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.